The morning sun cast long shadows across the golden wheat fields of New Eden. Jake Miller stood on his front porch, coffee mug in hand, watching the harvest machines work their way through the crops. The machines moved slowly and steadily, cutting neat rows through the grain. To anyone watching, they looked like normal farming equipment. Nothing special about them at all. Jake's wife Lisa walked out to join him. She wiped flour from her hands on her apron and smiled at the peaceful scene. "Another good harvest this year," she said. "The soil here is better than we ever expected when we first arrived." "Best decision we ever made, coming out here," Jake replied. He took a sip of his coffee and nodded toward their neighbor's house. "Ben's up early again. I can hear him working in that workshop of his." The sound of metal on metal came from Ben. Carter's garage. Ben had moved to New Eden 5 years ago, just like most of the other settlers. He said he wanted a quiet life after working as an engineer for so many years. The man could fix anything, and he was always happy to help his neighbors. When their equipment broke down, Lisa headed back inside to continue baking bread for the weekly community gathering. Jake finished his coffee and walked toward the administrative building at the center of town. As the colony administrator, he had paperwork to handle and supply requests to send back to Earth. The work was simple but important. Someone had to keep track of everything the colony needed. The town of New Eden looked just like dozens of other farming settlements scattered across human space. Small houses with gardens, wide streets perfect for moving farm equipment, and a few larger buildings for storage and community events. About 50,000 people called New Eden home. Most of them had come here looking for a peaceful life after careers in other fields. The administrative building buzzed with quiet activity. Colony residents came and went, handling various tasks. Some were filing reports about crop yields. Others were discussing plans for expanding the irrigation system. Rita Hayes sat at her desk near the back, reviewing security schedules and communication logs. Rita served as the colony's defense coordinator, though there wasn't much to coordinate on a peaceful farming world. She made sure the communication systems worked properly and handled the few minor disputes that came up between neighbors. Most of her time was spent on paperwork and routine maintenance checks. "Morning, Jake," Rita called out as he entered. "Got the weekly reports ready for transmission to Earth. Nothing exciting to report, as usual." "That's how we like it," Jake replied with a smile. He settled at his desk and began reviewing the colony's supply requests. They needed more spare parts for the farming equipment, some medical supplies, and various other basic items. Standard stuff for any agricultural settlement. Outside, the daily routine continued. Children walked to school while their parents headed to work in the fields or processing centers. The processing centers prepared the harvested crops for shipment to other worlds. New Eden produced enough food to feed itself, and still had plenty left over to trade. Ben Carter emerged from his workshop, wiping grease from his hands. He had been working on upgrades to the irrigation system's control computers. The man had a gift for improving systems and making them run more efficiently. His neighbors often joked that he could probably build a spaceship from spare farming equipment if he wanted to. "How's the project coming along?" asked Danny Walsh, who lived across the street. Danny worked in one of the processing centers and often stopped by to chat with Ben about technical matters. "Almost finished," Ben replied. "The new control system will help us manage water distribution much better. Should increase crop yields by at least 10% next season." Danny nodded, impressed. "You always find ways to make things work better. We're lucky to have someone with your skills living here." Ben just smiled and headed back into his workshop. He had work to finish before lunch. At the spaceport on the edge of town, cargo ships came and went on a regular schedule. The port wasn't very large, just big enough to handle the agricultural shipments and supply deliveries. A few technicians maintained the basic landing facilities and communication equipment. Everything looked normal and routine. Captain Steve Brooks supervised the loading of grain shipments onto a cargo vessel bound for the inner colonies. Steve had been managing spaceport operations for 3 years. Before that, he had worked on various transport ships moving cargo between human settlements. New Eden was a good assignment, quiet, peaceful, and far from any trouble. "Shipment manifest looks good," Steve told his assistant, Carol Martinez. "This load should reach Beta Station right on schedule." Carol nodded and made notes on her tablet. She handled most of the paperwork for incoming and outgoing shipments. The work was detail-oriented, but not difficult. Like most jobs on New Eden, it was the kind of steady, reliable work that let people build comfortable lives. In the fields, farmers drove their equipment through the crops. The machines looked old but well maintained. They did their jobs efficiently, without drawing any attention. Some of the newer settlers were impressed by how well the older equipment performed, but the longer-term residents just said that good maintenance made all the difference. Maria Santos guided her harvester through a section of corn. She had been farming on New Eden for 8 years and knew her equipment inside and out. The machine responded perfectly to her commands, cutting and collecting the grain with precision. She was proud of the yields her section produced each season. "Good crop this year," called out Tony Phillips from the next field over. Tony was working his way through a section of soybeans with his own harvester. "Weather's been perfect for growing." "Can't complain," Maria replied. "This planet's been good to us." Both farmers continued their work, moving steadily through their assigned sections. They would finish by evening and then head home to their families. Tomorrow would bring more of the same. Good, honest work under clear skies. As the day progressed, people throughout the colony went about their normal routines. Store owners served customers, teachers worked with students, and maintenance crews kept everything running smoothly. It was the kind of life that many humans dreamed about when they thought of settling on new worlds. Lisa Miller finished her baking and began preparing for the evening community meeting. These gatherings happened every week and gave residents a chance to discuss colony business and socialize. Tonight's agenda included plans for a new recreational facility and a discussion about expanding the school. Jake spent his afternoon reviewing supply requests and updating colony records. The paperwork was routine but necessary. Earth needed to know how the colony was doing and what resources it required. Jake made sure all the reports were accurate and complete. Rita Hayes checked the communication systems and ran her daily security sweep. New Eden was safe and peaceful, but maintaining good communication with other human settlements was important. She also kept track of any spacecraft that passed through the system, though most were just cargo ships and the occasional scientific survey vessel. As evening approached, Ben Carter finished his work in the workshop and cleaned up his tools. The irrigation system upgrades were nearly complete. Soon the colony would have even better water management, which would help ensure good harvests for years to come. The sun began to set over New Eden, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Lights came on in houses throughout the settlement as families gathered for dinner. Children played in yards while their parents relaxed after another day of productive work. From space, New Eden looked exactly like what it claimed to be, a simple farming colony where humans had built peaceful lives far from the conflicts and complications of the inner worlds. The planet's energy signatures showed agricultural equipment, basic infrastructure, and the contented activity of a thriving settlement. Nobody watching from the outside would have any reason to suspect that New Eden was anything other than what it appeared to be. The colony's residents had worked hard to create exactly that impression. They had succeeded completely. 3 days after the weekly community meeting, Ben Carter noticed something strange in the night sky. He had been working late in his workshop when he stepped outside for fresh air. The stars looked different somehow. Ben had studied astronomy as a hobby for many years, and he knew the constellations above New Eden very well. There were tiny distortions in the starlight. Most people would never notice them, but Ben's trained eye caught the subtle changes. The distortions moved in patterns that reminded him of gravitational effects he had studied long ago. Someone was bending space near their solar system. Ben went back inside and pulled out equipment he had not used in years. Hidden beneath his workbench was a scanner that could detect the energy signatures of large spacecraft. The device powered up quietly, its displays showing readings that made Ben's heart beat faster. Multiple large objects were moving at the edge of the New Eden system. The next morning, Ben walked over to Jake Miller's house before dawn. Jake was already awake, drinking coffee on his porch as usual. The two men had become good friends over the years, and they often talked about technical matters. "Jake, we need to have a private conversation," Ben said quietly. "Something's happening out there." Jake looked at his neighbor's serious expression and nodded. "Come inside." Lisa's still sleeping. In Jake's kitchen, Ben explained what he had seen and detected. The gravitational distortions, the energy signatures, and the movement patterns all pointed to one thing. A large fleet of spacecraft was gathering at the system's edge. Jake listened carefully and asked detailed questions. His questions showed that he understood military tactics and space combat better than most colony administrators would. When Ben finished his report, Jake was quiet for a long moment. "How long do you think we have?" Jake asked finally. "Hard to say. Depends on their intentions and their procedures. Could be days, could be weeks, but they're definitely watching us." Jake nodded slowly. "I'll contact Rita. We need to start getting ready." After Ben left, Jake sent a message to Rita Hayes using the colony's internal communication system. The message looked like a routine request about security schedules, but Rita would understand its real meaning. She had been waiting for this kind of message for years. Rita received Jake's message while she was reviewing supply inventories. She read it twice to make sure she understood correctly, then locked her office door and opened a secure communication panel hidden behind her desk. The panel connected to systems that had been installed when the colony was first established. She began sending coded messages to various colony residents. The messages used agricultural terminology and looked like routine farming reports. Anyone intercepting them would see discussions about crop rotation schedules, equipment maintenance, and harvest planning. But the recipients would understand the real meaning. Maria Santos received her message while servicing her harvester. The agricultural codes told her to begin preparing her equipment for alternative uses. She opened a hidden compartment in the machine and began activating systems that had been dormant for years. Her harvester was much more than it appeared to be. Tony Phillips got his message while checking irrigation systems in his field. The coded instructions told him to start powering up defensive installations hidden beneath his farm. Tony had helped install those systems when he first arrived on New Eden. Now it was time to see if they still worked properly. Captain Steve Brooks read his message at the spaceport. The agricultural codes directed him to begin modifying the ports, communication arrays, and defensive capabilities. The spaceport's equipment was more sophisticated than it looked, and Steve knew how to activate features that visiting cargo pilots never suspected. Throughout New Eden, similar messages reached other residents. Carol Martinez began preparing hidden systems in the cargo handling areas. Danny Walsh started activating special equipment in the processing centers. Each person had specific responsibilities that they had trained for, but hoped never to use. Ben Carter received confirmation that his initial report had been accepted and that preparations were beginning. He returned to his workshop and opened concealed panels that revealed equipment far more advanced than anything a retired engineer should possess. The workshop's true purpose was finally being revealed. Lisa Miller noticed increased activity around the colony, but didn't ask questions. She had lived on New Eden long enough to recognize the signs of preparation. Instead, she began organizing food supplies and medical equipment in ways that would support extended operations. Her experience managing logistics would be valuable in the days ahead. Meanwhile, in space far from New Eden, Admiral Vexter of the Zelkari Empire studied reports from his reconnaissance ships. The Zelkari had been expanding their territory for centuries, conquering species after species. Humans were their next target. The reports described New Eden as a typical human agricultural settlement. The energy signatures matched farming equipment and basic infrastructure. The population appeared to be civilian colonists focused on food production. The planet showed no signs of significant military presence or advanced defensive systems. Another primitive farming world, Admiral Vexter said to his tactical officer. These humans spread themselves thin across many planets, but never seemed to defend them properly. The tactical officer, Commander Zekino, agreed. Our intelligence shows similar patterns throughout human space. They focus on agriculture and trade instead of military strength. It should be easy to conquer their scattered settlements. Admiral Vexter had commanded successful campaigns against dozens of species. The pattern was always the same. Show overwhelming. Force, demand surrender, and crush any resistance quickly. Most species gave up without fighting once they saw the size of a Zelkari battle fleet. The Zelkari Third Battle Fleet consisted of over 200 ships. Massive dreadnoughts provided the main firepower, while carriers launched swarms of fighters. Cruisers and destroyers handled support roles, and transport ships carried occupation forces. It was more than enough power to destroy any human settlement. Begin. Standard intimidation procedures, Admiral Vexter ordered. I want these humans to understand the futility of resistance. The Zelkari fleet began broadcasting recordings of their previous conquests. The transmissions showed cities burning, military forces being destroyed, and populations surrendering to Zelkari rule. The messages were designed to terrorize potential enemies into giving up without a fight. On New Eden, Rita Hayes intercepted the Zelkari broadcasts. She studied the alien ships' formations and weapon signatures while maintaining her cover as a simple security coordinator. The enemy fleet was large and powerful, but they were following predictable patterns. Rita sent new coded messages to colony residents. The agricultural reports contained detailed tactical information about enemy capabilities and positioning. Each recipient would know exactly what they were facing and how to respond. Ben Carter analyzed the Zelkari fleet's technical specifications. His hidden scanners provided detailed information about their ship's energy systems, weapon capabilities, and defensive measures. The aliens were technologically advanced, but relied heavily on intimidation and overwhelming force. Jake Miller coordinated with other colonies throughout human space. His administrative reports contained hidden tactical data that helped build a complete picture of the Zelkari threat. Similar fleets were approaching other human settlements. Following the same intimidation strategy, the Zelkari had made one critical mistake. They assumed that human agricultural colonies were poorly defended and lightly armed. They had studied human military forces and concluded that humans were weak and scattered. But they had not understood the true nature of settlements like New Eden. As night fell over the colony, residents continued their preparations while maintaining normal routines. Children attended school, farmers worked in their fields, and stores remained open for business. To outside observers, New Eden still looked like a peaceful farming community, but beneath the surface, defensive systems were coming online. Hidden weapons were being prepared, and trained personnel were taking their positions. The quiet farming colony was revealing its true nature, and the Zelkari Empire was about to discover that humans were far more dangerous than they appeared. The gathering storm was almost ready to break, and New Eden was prepared to meet it. The Zelkari fleet moved closer to New Eden over the next 2 days. Admiral Vexther positioned his ships according to standard conquest procedures. The massive dreadnoughts formed the center of the formation, while smaller ships spread out to prevent any escape attempts. It was a formation designed to terrify enemies into surrender. On New Eden, the colonists watched the alien ships approach through hidden sensors. Ben Carter tracked their movements from his workshop, which now hummed with activity as concealed systems came fully online. The workshop's walls had opened to reveal banks of sophisticated monitoring equipment that had been disguised as storage shelves. Rita Hayes coordinated defensive preparations from her office in the administrative building. Maps of the colony covered her walls, but they showed much more than farming areas and residential zones. Hidden defensive positions, weapon emplacements, and underground facilities were marked throughout the settlement. Jake Miller maintained his cover as colony administrator while secretly organizing the final stages of preparation. His morning reports to Earth looked like routine agricultural updates, but they contained coded military intelligence about the approaching threat. Similar reports were being sent from human settlements across the galaxy. The children of New Eden continued attending school, but their teachers began implementing emergency procedures disguised as educational exercises. Carol Martinez led her students through what appeared to be a fire drill, but was actually practice for moving to secure underground shelters. The children thought it was just another safety lesson that Maria Santos made final adjustments to her harvester. In the fields, the machine's hidden weapon systems were now fully operational, though they remained concealed beneath agricultural equipment panels. To anyone watching, she was simply performing routine maintenance on farming equipment. Tony Phillips checked the defensive installations hidden beneath his crops. The systems had been dormant for years, but they powered up smoothly when activated. Underground weapon platforms rose into position among the corn stalks, their sensors scanning the sky for approaching threats. At the spaceport, Captain Steve Brooks prepared communication arrays that could do much more than handle cargo manifests. The port's true capabilities were finally being revealed as military-grade sensors and defensive systems came online throughout the facility. On the morning of the 3rd day, Admiral Vexther decided it was time to make contact with the human settlement. He opened a communication channel to New Eden and transmitted the standard Zelkari ultimatum. His message was broadcast on all frequencies to ensure the humans could not miss it. Attention human settlement designated New Eden, the Admiral's voice boomed across the colony's communication systems. I am Admiral Vexther of the Zelkari Empire. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our territory. Rita Hayes received the transmission in her office. She activated recording systems while maintaining her cover as a confused colonial security officer. Her response would be crucial to maintaining the deception until the right moment. This is Rita Hayes, New Eden Defense Coordinator, she replied, making her voice sound nervous and uncertain. I don't understand what you want. We're just a farming community. We don't have any military forces here. Admiral Vexther smiled at the predictable response. Humans always claim to be peaceful farmers when faced with superior force. You will surrender all colonial administrative functions to Zelkari authority, he continued. All human military personnel will be removed from the planet. The population will submit to Zelkari rule. Military personnel? Rita asked, sounding genuinely confused. Sir, we don't have military personnel here. I used to serve in the defense corps years ago, but I'm retired now. I just handle minor security issues and maintained communication with Earth. The Admiral's tactical officers reviewed their intelligence reports while listening to the conversation. Everything matched their expectations. The human settlement appeared to have minimal defensive capabilities and no significant military presence. Rita Hayes sounded like exactly what she claimed to be, a former military officer trying to manage an impossible situation. "You have 1 standard hour to comply with our demands," Admiral Vexter announced. "Remove all military equipment and personnel. Prepare your population for processing under Zelkari administration. Any resistance will result in the destruction of your settlement." Rita's voice shook as she responded. "Please, Admiral, you have to understand. We're just farmers and their families. We grow food and send it to other human colonies. We don't have military equipment or training. Can't we work out some kind of peaceful arrangement?" During this exchange, the final preparations continued. Throughout New Eden, Ben Carter activated the last of the hidden defensive systems. His workshop was now revealed to be a sophisticated command center connected to installations across the planet and throughout the solar system. Jake Miller sent coded updates to other human settlements. The agricultural reports looked routine, but they contained tactical information about Zelkari ship positions, weapon capabilities, and formation weaknesses. The information was being shared across human space as similar confrontations developed. At other colonies, Lisa Miller organized emergency supplies and medical equipment in the community center. Her preparations looked like standard disaster response procedures, but she was actually setting up a field hospital that could handle combat casualties. Her logistics experience was proving valuable. Danny Walsh made final checks on equipment. In the processing centers, the facilities appeared to be simple food processing plants, but they contained sophisticated manufacturing capabilities that could produce much more than agricultural products when needed. The hour deadline approached, while Rita continued her performance as a desperate colonial administrator. She requested clarification on the Zelkari demands, asked for more time to contact Earth for instructions, and generally behaved like someone trying to avoid conflict with a superior force. "Admiral, I've contacted Earth for guidance, but our communication systems are limited," Rita said during one transmission. "The colonial government needs time to review your terms. We want to cooperate, but we need to understand exactly what you're requiring." Admiral Vexter grew impatient with the delays, but the human responses were typical of conquered populations. Fear, confusion, and attempts to buy time were normal reactions. The Zelkari had seen the same patterns hundreds of times during their expansion across the galaxy. "Your time is nearly expired," the Admiral warned. "Prepare for inspection teams to verify compliance with our demands. Any deception or hidden military assets will result in immediate bombardment of your settlement." "We understand, Admiral," Rita replied. "I'm preparing a complete inventory of our equipment and personnel. You'll see that we're exactly what we claim to be, a peaceful farming community. We have harvesting equipment, processing facilities, and basic infrastructure. Nothing more." With 30 minutes remaining before the deadline, the Zelkari fleet moved into final attack position. Admiral Vexter ordered his ships to power up their weapon systems, while maintaining the intimidating formation that had proven successful against so many other species. The dreadnoughts targeted the colony's main population centers, while cruisers prepared to destroy any defensive installations. Fighter squadrons stood ready to launch from carrier ships. Transport vessels moved into position to deploy occupation forces once resistance was eliminated. On New Eden, the colonists took their final positions. Children and elderly residents moved to secure underground shelters that had been disguised as storage facilities. Everyone else prepared to man defensive positions that had been hidden throughout the settlement. Ben Carter's command center displayed tactical information from across the solar system. Hidden sensors showed the exact position of every Zelkari ship, their weapon status, and their formation weaknesses. The enemy had positioned themselves exactly where human defensive planners had hoped they would. Rita Hayes made her final transmission. As the hour deadline approached, Admiral Vexter, this is Colonial Administrator Rita Hayes, requesting final confirmation of your terms. We are prepared to cooperate fully with your requirements. Please confirm that you will accept our peaceful surrender. The Admiral checked his chronometer. The hour was almost up, and the humans were behaving exactly as expected. Soon the Third Battle Fleet would add another conquest to the Zelkari Empire's growing territory. The destruction of this farming colony would serve as an example to other human settlements. Your time has expired, Admiral Vexter announced. Prepare to be boarded for inspection. Any deception will be met with immediate destruction. The moment of truth had arrived, and both sides were ready for what would come next. Admiral Vexter looked at the time display on his command console. The hour deadline had passed, and the humans had not fully complied with his demands. Their responses seemed genuine enough, but Zelkari conquest doctrine required a show of force to establish dominance over new territories. Begin the attack, Admiral Vexter ordered his fleet. Standard intimidation pattern. Destroy a few targets to demonstrate our superiority, then accept their surrender. The time was exactly 1432 local New Eden time. Weapon systems across the Zelkari fleet powered up to full strength. The massive dreadnoughts targeted what appeared to be the colony's main administrative buildings. Cruisers aimed at the spaceport and processing facilities. The first wave of fighter craft launched from carrier ships, heading toward the planet's surface dot on New Eden. Rita Hayes watched the enemy ships begin their attack through her command center displays. She had maintained her cover perfectly, convincing the Zelkari that she was just a confused colonial administrator. Now it was time to drop all pretense. All stations, this is Colonel Rita Hayes, Human Defense Corps, she announced over secured communication channels. Defensive Protocol 7 is now active. Repeat, Protocol 7 is active. All units prepare for engagement. At 1433, Ben Carter's workshop revealed its true nature as a sophisticated military command center. Hidden panels slid open throughout the facility, exposing banks of tactical computers and communication equipment. The elderly engineer, who had seemed to spend his time fixing farm equipment, was actually coordinating a complex defensive network. All defensive installations report ready status, Ben announced to Rita. Orbital platforms are online. Ground-based systems are operational. We have complete sensor coverage of the approaching enemy force. Throughout New Eden, the hidden truth was finally revealed. Maria Santos's harvester dropped its agricultural disguise as armor plating slid back to expose advanced weapon systems. The machine that had been cutting crops for years was actually a mobile defense platform designed to engage enemy aircraft. Tony Phillips activated the defensive installations hidden beneath his cornfield. What had appeared to be irrigation equipment rose from underground positions as sophisticated anti-ship weapons. The corn stalks parted to reveal targeting sensors and missile launchers that had been waiting years for this moment. At 1434, the orbital platforms that the Zelkari had dismissed as simple communication. Satellites activated military-grade defensive systems. Energy shields came online around each platform, while weapon batteries extended from concealed compartments. The satellites had been monitoring space traffic, but they were also powerful defensive weapons. The first wave of 4 Zelkari fighters encountered defensive fire unlike anything in their tactical databases. The farming equipment they had observed was launching missiles with precision and power that surprised the enemy pilots. Several fighters were destroyed in the first exchange of fire. Captain Steve Brooks, activated the spaceport's hidden capabilities. The simple cargo handling facility transformed into a military installation as concealed weapon systems came online. Anti-aircraft batteries rose from underground positions, while the communication arrays revealed their true purpose as military sensors. At 1435, Rita Hayes opened a direct communication channel to Admiral Vexter. Her voice was no longer nervous or uncertain. She spoke with the authority of an experienced military officer addressing an enemy commander. Admiral Vexter, this is Colonel Rita Hayes of the Human Defense Corps. I am formally notifying you that you have attacked a defended military installation. Your forces are now engaged with active Human Defense Corps units. The Admiral stared at his communication display in shock. The woman who had sounded like a frightened civilian administrator was now speaking with military precision and confidence. His tactical officers reported that the energy signatures from the planet were completely different from what their sensors had detected earlier. At 1436, defensive installations throughout the new Eden system came online simultaneously. What the Zelkari had thought were asteroids and space debris revealed themselves as camouflaged weapon platforms. The entire solar system had been prepared as a defensive fortress, and the enemy fleet was now surrounded. Hidden bases on New Edens. 3 moons activated powerful defensive systems. Weapons that had been disguised as mining equipment began targeting the Zelkari ships with devastating precision. The moons themselves had been turned into fortress worlds without the attackers. Realizing it, Jake Miller coordinated with other human settlements across the galaxy. His administrative reports had been sharing tactical information about Zelkari fleet movements and capabilities. Now similar defensive activations were beginning at farming colonies throughout human space. 1437. The trap was fully revealed. The Zelkari Third Battle Fleet found itself in the worst possible tactical position. They had advanced into a carefully prepared killing field, surrounded by defensive installations with overlapping coverage. Every ship in the fleet was targeted by multiple weapon systems. Admiral Vexter realized too late that the humans had been deceiving them from the beginning. The peaceful farming colony was actually a sophisticated military base. The retired colonists were active military personnel. The agricultural equipment was camouflaged weapon systems. All ships, emergency formation change, the Admiral ordered desperately. We've been deceived. This is a military installation, not a farming colony. But the Zelkari ships were configured for attacking a defenseless target, not for fighting. A prepared defensive network. Their formation left them vulnerable to the coordinated fire from installations they had never suspected existed. 1438. Ben Carter initiated the final phase of the defensive plan. Every weapon system in the new Eden solar system began firing in perfect coordination. The attack had been planned and practiced for years, taking advantage of every weakness in standard Zelkari tactics. The farming equipment throughout the colony revealed its true nature as mobile weapons platforms engaged the enemy fighters. Harvesters launched surface-to-air missiles, while processing facilities activated anti-ship weapons. The entire settlement was a disguised military base. Danny Walsh's processing center opened hidden weapon bays that contained manufacturing equipment for military supplies. The facility that had been producing food was also capable of producing ammunition, spare parts, and other military necessities during extended combat. At 1439, the Zelkari fleet began taking heavy casualties. The dreadnoughts that had seemed so intimidating were now under fire from weapons they couldn't locate or target effectively. The hidden defensive installations were using advanced stealth, technology, and tactical coordination. Lisa Miller's logistics preparations proved their worth as supply lines activated throughout the colony. Food, medical supplies, and ammunition moved efficiently to defensive positions. Her experience managing complex supply chains was keeping the defense network operational. The orbital platforms that had appeared to be simple satellites were actually equipped with weapons more powerful than anything on the Zelkari cruisers. They began systematically destroying enemy ships while their defensive shields absorbed return fire. At 1440, Admiral Vexther's flagship came under direct attack from multiple hidden weapon platforms. The ship's shields failed under the concentrated fire, and critical systems began shutting down. The Admiral realized that his entire fleet was about to be destroyed. "Emergency retreat," Admiral Vexther ordered. "All ships withdraw immediately. Signal the Empire that we have encountered a major military installation disguised as a farming colony." But most of the Zelkari ships were already too damaged to escape. The coordinated defensive fire had been planned to prevent exactly this kind of retreat. Only a few vessels on the edge of the formation had any chance of reaching safe distance. At 1441, the engagement was effectively over. The Zelkari Third Battle Fleet, which had expected to intimidate a few thousand farmers, had been destroyed by one of the most sophisticated defensive networks ever constructed. The 9-minute battle was already being recorded as one of the shortest decisive victories in military history. Rita Hayes opened one final communication channel to the surviving Zelkari ships. "Admiral, this is Colonel Hayes. Your attack on New Eden has failed. I suggest you use your remaining ships to return to your territory and inform your leaders that human space is better defended than they assumed." The few surviving Zelkari vessels fled the system, carrying news of their devastating defeat back to the Empire. The peaceful farming colony had revealed itself to be humanity's most effective defensive strategy. The smoking remains of Zelkari ships drifted through space around New Eden. Admiral Vexther sat in his damaged command chair, staring at the tactical display that showed the destruction of his fleet. Over 200 ships had been reduced to fewer than 20 badly damaged vessels in just 9 minutes. How is this possible? The Admiral whispered to his surviving tactical officer. "Our intelligence reports were accurate. New Eden is a farming colony with 50,000 human colonists. We observed them for days." Commander Zekanol checked his own instruments, but the readings confirmed what they had witnessed. "Sir, the colony was exactly what our reports described. But somehow every piece of farming equipment was actually a weapon system. Every colonist appears to be a trained military operator." On New Eden, Rita Hayes stood in her command center, watching the last Zelkari ships limp away from the system. The defensive operation had worked perfectly, but now came the difficult task of explaining to the galaxy what had really happened. "Ben, start powering down the defensive systems," Rita ordered. "We need to begin damage assessment and casualty reports. Jake, prepare a full briefing for Defense Corps Command. They'll want to know how effective the deception was." Ben Carter began the process of returning his workshop to its civilian appearance. The military equipment would remain hidden, but the agricultural facade needed to be restored. The colony would continue to function as a farming settlement, but everyone now knew its true nature. "Casualties are minimal," reported Carol Martinez from the medical center. 3 people injured during the activation sequence, all minor. No combat casualties among our personnel. The enemy never got close enough to threaten our population centers. Jake Miller reviewed the tactical data from the engagement. The 9-minute battle had provided valuable information about Zelkari capabilities and weaknesses. This intelligence would be shared with other human settlements and Defense Corps units throughout the galaxy. The surviving Zelkari prisoners were brought to a secure facility beneath the administrative building. Admiral Vexther found himself face to face with the people he had tried to intimidate just hours earlier. But now he understood that none of them were simple farmers. I am Colonel Rita Hayes, Human Defense Corps, retired, Rita said as she entered. The detention area. I suppose you have questions about what happened to your fleet. Admiral Vexter stared at the woman who had fooled him so completely. You were convincing as a frightened civilian administrator. I believed your performance. Entirely. That was the point, Rita replied. For the past 15 years, I've been practicing that role. Every retired Defense Corps officer on New Eden has been doing the same thing. We wanted to seem like exactly what you expected to find. Ben Carter joined the conversation, still wearing his work clothes from the engineering shop. The Zelkari Empire has been studying human military capabilities for years. You analyzed our fleet movements, our ship designs, and our defensive strategies. But you never understood our real defensive plan. The Admiral looked confused. What do you mean? We studied every human military installation and fleet base. We knew the locations of your ships and the strength of your forces. That's exactly. Right, Ben explained. You studied our obvious military assets. But you never realized that our real defense network consists of farming colonies like this one. Every settlement you dismissed as agricultural is actually a military fortress. Jake. Miller brought detailed maps that showed the scope of the deception. New Eden isn't unique, Admiral. We have similar installations throughout human space. Thousands of farming colonies that are actually defensive positions manned by retired military personnel. The Zelkari commander studied the maps with growing horror. Every agricultural settlement we identified. They're all military bases? Most of them, Jake confirmed. We learned from studying your previous conquests. You always attack the obvious military targets first, then move against civilian populations. So we made our military capabilities look civilian. Lisa Miller explained the logistics behind the deception. It takes a special kind of person to retire to a farming colony and spend years pretending to be a simple colonist. But thousands of Defense Corps veterans were willing to do exactly that. Admiral Vexter began to understand the scope of what humans had accomplished. Your entire defensive strategy is based on deception. You made us think you were weak and scattered when you are actually prepared for war. We prefer peace, Rita said. Everyone on New Eden genuinely wanted to live quiet lives growing crops and raising families. But we also knew that someday we might need to defend ourselves. So we prepared for both possibilities. The news of the New Eden battle spread quickly, through both human and Zelkari space. Other human colonies began revealing their true nature as the deception was no longer necessary. The galaxy discovered that humanity's defensive network was far more extensive than anyone had realized. Maria. Santos returned her harvester to agricultural configuration, but she kept the weapon systems ready for quick activation. It feels strange to go back to just cutting grain after what we did today, she told Tony Phillips. Tony was covering his defensive installations with fresh corn plantings. We always knew this day might come. Now we can farm in peace, knowing that we proved our defenses work. Captain Steve Brooks restored the spaceport to its civilian appearance while keeping the military systems on standby. Cargo ships would continue arriving and departing, but now everyone knew the port could defend itself if necessary. Danny Walsh's processing center resumed food production, but the facility's manufacturing capabilities remained available for military needs. The dual-purpose design had worked exactly as intended. Throughout human space, similar revelations were occurring. The Zelkari Empire found itself facing not a scattered collection of farming settlements, but a coordinated network of fortress worlds. Their expansion plans suddenly seemed much more difficult. The few surviving Zelkari ships reached their home territory and reported the disaster to Imperial Command. The news that a single human farming colony had destroyed the Third Battle Fleet sent shockwaves through the Empire's military leadership. How many of these hidden fortresses do the humans have? Demanded Strategy Morgith, when he received the report. If every agricultural settlement is actually a military base, then our entire strategy needs to be reconsidered. The intelligence officers scrambled to reanalyze their data on human space. Settlements they had dismissed as peaceful farming communities now appeared to be potential military threats. The scope of human defensive preparations was far beyond anything they had imagined. On New Eden, life slowly returned to normal routines. Children came back from the underground shelters and resumed their classes. Farmers returned to their fields, though their equipment would never look quite the same to outside observers. Ben Carter continued working in his shop, maintaining both the agricultural equipment and the hidden military systems. His dual role as engineer and defense coordinator would continue for as long as the colony needed both capabilities. Jake Miller filed his reports with Earth, documenting both the agricultural production and the military engagement. The colony's success would serve as a model for other settlements. Throughout human space, Rhea Hayes returned to her routine security duties. But now the entire galaxy knew that she was much more than a simple colonial administrator. The deception had been revealed, but the defensive network remained operational. The evening community meeting that week drew the largest crowd in the colony's history. Everyone wanted to discuss what had happened and what it meant for their future. The meeting agenda included plans for improved crop yields and enhanced defensive capabilities. As the sun set over New Eden, the colonists reflected on their achievement. They had successfully defended their home while maintaining their chosen way of life. The farming colony that had fooled an empire remained a farming colony, but now everyone knew it was also something much more. The peaceful fields of grain swayed in the evening breeze, hiding secrets that had changed the balance of power in the galaxy. New Eden had proven that sometimes the best defense was making your enemies underestimate you completely.